Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the sixth team on our brief history of original USFL teams. We're going to be doing the Houston Gamblers. So the Houston Gamblers are kind of a lot easier than I expected to talk about because honestly, both years kind of just are mushed together because they're very similar. I'll just start with this. Their owners for both years were Alvin Lubetkin, Dr. Jerry Agarvelts, and that was it. But then their third owner in 84 was Fred Gerson, and then it was Jay Rollier in 85. It's the only thing that changed. So, yeah, this team is, you'll see why it's kind of easy to talk about. So, this team is mainly known for the run and shoot, which was mainly made thanks to their head coach, Jack Pardee, and their offensive coordinator for the first year, Daryl Moose Davis. He was hired by Pardee to fully install the run and shoot as the team's, true offense. It was led by Jim Kelly, who, as we all know, would go on to be a great quarterback for the Bills, but after spurning the Bills at first, he went to Houston to play there. So, yeah. The Gamblers, however, were able to just completely wreck secondaries as they just completely destroyed teams. They had the best offense. They scored 618 points in 84. And the record in 83 was 456. So, yeah, they were pretty good. And he became the second true superstar, and he was basically the answer to the NFL's Dan Marino. And then the run and shoot offense would end up being adapted by teams like the Lions, Falcons, and Oilers. All three of them were in the upper half of scoring while using it. But despite that, it was considered a gimmick by some other teams, as none of those teams would end up going to the Super Bowl. But yeah, the influence of that team, though, is still done today, as in the 70s, most teams used the two-back pro set, the I formation a lot. But now we see almost every single team using a ton of packages that have four wide receivers and option routes, which is mainly because of the run and shoot. So now it's time for as the team did. So both years were pretty much honestly the same. It's really weird, but yeah. So the first year they would end up going 11-5, which was good enough to win the Central Division as they were part of the 84 expansion. And so they won the Central Division with that 13-5 record. But they would go on to lose to the Arizona Wranglers 17-16 in the first round of the playoffs, which, yeah, that's not good. And then in 85, the team would end up going 10-8 and finish third in the Western Conference and still make the playoffs, but then they would lose in the first round of the playoffs 22-20. Yeah, as I said, both years are very similar, but in terms of the actual team, here's what needs to be known. So despite the fact they lost in the first round both times, they did have a lot of good things. So in 84, when the USFL decided to move to fall, the team had a big question about it, as Jim Kelly, one of the more public guys of the USFL, said that it was 100% wrong to go to the fall. But yeah, and then in 85, Davis, the offensive coordinator, left to go be the head coach of the Denver Gold. And the run and shoot still was great, as the first game of that season against the LA Express would be the greatest game never seen, as very few people were actually at the game and it wasn't televised. And what happened was, despite being down 31-13 with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the Gamblers actually used the no-huddle offense before a 2-minute drill, which is considered the first time ever, and they would go on to win the game 34-33, which is truly a great game. And then in the first 5 games, Jim Kelly Jim Kelly in the first 5 games was on pace to throw for 7,400 yards and 78 touchdowns. But he ended up getting hurt. He missed 6 games. But their backup, Todd Dillon, was still good enough to make it to where they combined for 6,100 yards, which is a professional American football record as a team passing yards. And then they had the first time in professional football where 3 receivers caught 1,000 yards in the same season, as Clarence Verdon, Gerald McNeil, and Richard Johnson all did it. And they once again, as I said before, lost in the playoffs. And then in terms of the actual fan reception, is where you see some of the problems in the team. As you realize that the move to fall didn't affect every team, even some of the ones that stayed in places, like the Tampa Bay Bandits, as we discussed earlier. They were able to be completely fine in terms of attendance, even when the move was announced. But this team was not that. In 1984, they actually were very solid in attendance, as they had 28,000 people. Granted, it was ninth in the league, which is half, but 28,000 is nothing to scoff at. But then in 85, despite having that awesome offense, their numbers went down to 19,000 per game, and that was 8th out of 14. So they lost a good amount of fans, and that really does hurt. And because of that and other stuff, they ended up deciding to sell the team, as they were actually like losing money and they didn't have enough to pay players. So they were originally they sold the team to Stephen Ross, the owner or future owner of the Miami Dolphins, and then he announced that he was going to merge the team with the New Jersey Generals, with the Generals being the surviving team, which I talked about a little bit in the Generals brief history, and that he would be a full partner with Generals owner Donald Trump, and that Argovich would become the merged team's president. But Ross backed out of the merger after discovering the Gamblers' debt load was a lot larger than he thought. But Trump reimbursed him and basically became the sole owner of both teams. And he was going to hire Pardee as the coach, and it was going to be a Kelly and Walker offense to be the dream team, and mainly the only team that could probably compete with the Stars. But it ended up not happening, so yeah. The most notable players on this team, though, were Jim Kelly, future Washington Redskins receiver Ricky Sanders, future Lions receiver Richard Johnson, future Colts kick returner Clarence Verdon, and future Browns wide receiver Gerald McNeil. Todd Fowler, the featured running back in the team, was notable as being the first USFL player that the rival NFL signed away from them when he was signed by the Cowboys. So yeah, their single season leaders were also their career leaders in Todd Fowler, who had the most rushing yards, Richard Johnson, who had the most receiving yards, and Jim Kelly, who had the league record for most passing yards in a season at 5,200, and, well, kind of obvious that he had the most yards. As for the players, it's not surprising that there were a lot of offensive guys, as in both 84 and 85, I didn't really need to mention it, but it's kind of obvious they led the league in offense, like, by a long shot. And the team overall just was really solid. I mean, in 84, Richard Johnson and Ricky Sanders had the two most receptions in the league, with Richard Johnson also having the most yards. And Jim Kelly, of course, had the most passing yards by about, a lot. And then in 85, Richard Johnson led the league again in receptions and was second in total yards. And once again, despite the fact that he was hurt for 6 games, Jim Kelly led the league in passing yards. Pretty obvious. And then now we get to the players. So there's actually only one player that isn't a noteworthy name that did anything, just a player. So yeah, first off, we're going to talk about Mouse Davis, the guy that kind of helped make the run and shoot. After the Gamblers, he and head coaching the Gold, he'd be the OC for the Detroit Lions, and then he'd be the OC for the Toronto Argonauts, the Falcons quarterback coach, and then some other leagues. But he never really did anything. Outside of it, he was never really a head coach after the Golds, yeah. Todd Fowler, the first guy to go to the NFL, would only end up playing 85 to 88 for the Cowboys. He didn't really do a lot. He did start a couple games, but overall, he just kind of was there, so yeah. And then in terms of the guys who were in an all-league or all-star team, we have Clarence Verdon, who was selected in 85. He ended up winning a Super Bowl and being a 2-time Pro Bowler in the NFL, as he was on the Redskins for a couple years, where he ended up winning a Super Bowl, and then he was on the Colts for a few years and Falcons for a few years. Receiving-wise, he didn't do literally anything, but he ended up having 6,500 return yards and 12 total touchdowns. And he did start 25 games in his career, so overall it's pretty solid. And then we get to Gerald McNeil. Gerald McNeil, overall, he ended up being a member of the punt returning all league team in 85. And in the NFL, he would end up being a one-time Pro Bowler with his time in the Cleveland Browns. And then he'd be the Oilers one year. He had 3,500 total yards and then 380 receiving yards. I mean, he was he was a guy that you can just look at and say, like, yeah, he was okay. He wasn't great, but he was okay. He did his job. And then the next guy is Pete Catton. He was on the 84 All-League and All-Star team, which is pretty solid to be on both. And in terms of what he would do afterward, nothing. He was with the Blue Bombers for a couple years before, and then after, he was with the Tiger Cats for 1 year in Hamilton. Nothing really to say about him. I mean, yeah, that's kind of all he did. Then Kiki D'Alia, he was on the All-League team in both 84 and 85. In terms of what he would end up doing, he would end up playing for the Bengals for 2 years and would end up recording a sack in the NFL. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's something. And then we have Tony Fritsch. He would be on the All-League team in 84. And his career is kind of weird. So he ended his career at the Gamblers. He started with the Cowboys, then the Chargers, then the Oilers, then the Saints, and then the Gamblers. I mean, he played in a lot of games. He attempted 230 field goals over his career, but only made 130 of them, which explains why I kept moving teams. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler 1 year, he was an All-Pro 1 year, and he does have a ring. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys, so I guess he can always say that, he's a legendary Super Bowl champion kicker. So, yeah. And then we have linebacker Andy Hawkins, who was on the 85 All-Star team. He had played for the Buccaneers for a few years before joining the USFL, but afterward he would go play for the Chargers 2 years and the Chiefs 1 year. He has 5 sacks in his career. Not a lot, but hey, it's something. And then we have wide receiver Richard Johnson, who was on the All-League team in 84, and then both the All-League and All-Star in 85. I think he's probably one of the big snubs to not be on the All-Star team. But yeah, overall, he would go on to play for the Redskins for a year and the Lions 2 years and do pretty much nothing. And now we get to the guys who were on the all-time team. So, I hadn't mentioned his name yet. So, yeah. On the all-time team, we have Jack Pardee as one of the 2 second-team coaches. There's not really a lot to say. He was the head coach for literally the best offense in football. Both years he was the coach there. So that's pretty much all that needs to be said. I mean, just honestly, yeah. He makes it really easy. He was a head coach of a team with a legendary offense. I mean, what did he do afterward? After the Gamblers, he would be a head coach of the Houston Oilers for a few years and the University of Houston. And with the Oilers, he famously choked that 31-3 game against the Buffalo Bills because he kept using the run and shoot. He's a college football Hall of Famer. Solid. Now we get Ricky Sanders, who is one of the guys who is kind of surprising that he was on the all-time over Richard Johnson. But yeah. So after the Gamblers, he played for the Redskins for a few years, where he'd win 2 Super Bowls. He played for the Falcons, then the Dolphins, then back to the Falcons. He's on the 70 greatest Redskins list. He's a 2-time champ. He has 6,400 receiving yards. In terms of what he really did after Gamblers, he didn't do a ton. He did solid, but he got 2 rings out of it. Then we have our first team guys. Our first team player is, of course, Jim Kelly, the quarterback. He played 2 years in the USFL. He holds the record for most passing touchdowns in the league. That's pretty much all you really need to know. He won a Rookie of the Year in the USFL. He won MVP in 84, both awards. He was on the All-League team for quarterback in 84. and in 85 he was on both the All-League and All-Star team for quarterback. He is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. In fact, he is the only, as of now, he is the only member of the 8 teams that they brought back that the original had a Hall of Famer on, which is really wild, as all the other guys played for other teams. Yeah. I mean, the NFL, he's to me a debatable Hall of Famer. He only had 3,500 or 35,000 passing yards. He was only a All-Pro twice, one first, one second. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler, a touchdown leader, a pass rating leader, completions percentage leader. It is debatable whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame, as he gets a lot of credit because he got to 4 Super Bowls. But he still is in the Hall of Fame, and you got to respect that. And he's great. And then we get, last but not least, Luther Bradley. Why is he last? Well, he is first-team cornerback, and he's second-team safety. Pretty insane. He's the USFL's all-time interceptions leader. I mean, solid. He played for the Lions for a few years before, and he ended his career after the Gamblers. He played for 3 different teams. I mean, he may not have done a lot before or after, but the fact that he's first team at cornerback and second team safety is insane. Because, like, yeah, I know we had Anthony Carter, who was a first and second team, but when you're a returner, it's a lot easier. If you're a good receiver and then you're a good returner, it's a lot easier to be on an all-time team rather than playing 2 different defensive back positions. So, yeah. Overall, that's, I guess, all we can say about the legend that is, the Houston Gamblers. As a team, they kind of were both really, really good for the league, but then as a team themselves were kind of a failure because they did make a lot of people like the league since you had this awesome offense in the run and shoot, which was just high scoring. And yeah, it didn't translate fully well to the NFL as it did have a lot of flaws, especially in holding leads. But when you lose in the first round by a combined score of 3, that really hurts, especially when you realize that Arizona team ended up going to the final to lose to the Stars. But yeah, and especially the fact that they didn't have the 86 season, as even though they wouldn't have been the Gamblers anymore, I mean, Jim Kelly would have had a really good chance to actually beat that really, really good Stars team. Yeah, this has been Zomfox. If you guys like this series and you want me to do this on the teams that aren't coming back, let me know in the comments. Because as of now, I'm planning to stop this series once I finish the 8 teams they brought back. And as of now, I only have the Birmingham Stallions and the Stars, who played in like 2 cities, but I think the Philadelphia Stars. So if you guys want me to do teams like the Denver Gold or the Jacksonville Bulls, you just let me know in the comments below. So yeah, this has been Zomfox. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload content at any point, just subscribe and then hit the bell notification. Yeah, have a great night.